Hey gamers, Blindy here. It's May 2025 and I just finished playing Final Fantasy VII Remake. Before I continue, I want to shout out Space Bowie for making this video possible. Thank you so much. As a small detail, I played Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, which is what's available on Steam. It's a visually enhanced version of the game and includes Intermission, which is an added part of the game that lets you play as Yuffie for several hours. And it feels a little crazy to say this game is now over 5 years old. It was released on April 10th, 2020, right at the beginning of that time where video games became a more important part of our lives because the outside world was deadly and scary. At the time, it was released on the PlayStation 4, but has since been released for the PlayStation 5, Windows, and for the first time in one of my videos, I can say it'll be released on the Nintendo Switch too. I'm sorry for all the Xbox fans out there. I'm sure most of you already know, but this game was released by Square Enix, who is already famous for nearly every RPG you've ever played, primarily all the Final Fantasy games. I played this on my LCD Steam Deck, as many of you might have already guessed. And oh man, this game claims it is verified for the system, but it's the first time that I would say that a verified game should not have that designation. Usually I would say that a game might be marked as playable, but in reality could be considered verified, or unsupported should be considered playable, but this is the first time I'll easily say a game should be lowered into the next lower tier. I'll get into more detail about why I think this shouldn't qualify as a verified game later, but I couldn't help but getting a little agitated while thinking about it here. At least it was decent on battery life. For a newer AAA game, it does alright. You can get over an hour and up to about an hour and a half per charge, so it hangs in there well enough. And if you're thinking about purchasing this for yourself, keep in mind that the price is still pretty steep. Here in Canada, the full price of the game is $93.49. On sale, it'll go for 50% off, so $46.74 is much cheaper, but if you're super frugal, like I tend to be, it'll still be a significant price to pay for this game. My guess is that it won't get much cheaper anytime soon, so start saving up if you're looking for the cheapest price on this game. Also, you're going to need to reserve a decent amount of space on your device. It's recommended to have at least 100 gigs free, and looking at my install, it was almost 95 gigs. Games sure have come a long way since the PlayStation 1 days, haven't they? The original game, which I reviewed just a few months ago, was less than 1.5 gigs, and that used 3 discs. And now we're hardly batting an eye at 100 gigs. Crazy times, man. And this was my first time playing Remake. You have the option of 4 difficulty settings, but essentially it's just easy and normal difficulty, with classic modes for each, which allows you to simplify the combat options from my understanding. If you complete the game, you unlock a hard difficulty. I played it on normal difficulty, which most players will play. If you're only in the game for the story and aren't really interested in the combat, easy mode is meant for you to enjoy the story. But I think if you're trying to enjoy the game for everything that it's got, normal is perfect for pretty much everyone. It's not overwhelmingly challenging, but you have to be skillful and aware during the more challenging battles. This game has been widely praised, but to be honest, I think I expected a higher score from Metacritic. It gets an 87 with the PS4 being the only platform listed. Steam is similar with an 89% approval rating with 30,000 reviews. Knowing how much praise this game had received, I thought this game would have been in the 90s at least, but neither score quite got to that mark. Like the original game, this isn't really intended for younger kids, so keep that in mind. The ESRB rates this as a T. It contains violence and blood, but I think you can expect that when the main character's weapon is a sword as tall as he is, and Sephiroth's sword is even bigger. Not that size matters or anything, just saying. There are suggestive themes, and it feels a bit different than the original game. In the PlayStation 1 game, things like the cross-dressing section were funny, but here you get to see how beautiful Cloud really got to look, as well as an extravagant performance of him dancing like a lady. Wall Market has a few places that might be a bit mature for some kids, especially since the characters look much better in this game than they did back then. There's also some language to consider as well. There's a bit of it, and usually it comes from Barrett, but I think the worst of it is BS, but no F-bombs are dropped. It seems some people are actually put off by the amount of swearing in this game, and at first I found it a bit jarring as well, but after a few hours I kinda just got used to the characters and the way they spoke. And there are some alcohol and tobacco references in this game as well. Now, leading into my next point, I was a little worried that this game was going to end up like The Hobbit. For those of you that are fans of The Lord of the Rings, the J.R.R. Tolkien books, or any of that, you're probably familiar with the movies. The 3 mainline books were each made into movies, 1 movie for each book. But The Hobbit, the prequel story, was shorter than any of the other books, but when it got the movie treatment, it was stretched into 3 movies, for some reason. I was hoping that the original game wasn't going to be turned into 3 mediocre remakes, and it looks like, for the most part, it managed to do that pretty well. So the point I was trying to get to was that this game, you'll need about 32.5 hours to play, according to how long to beat. I took around 36.5 hours, so several hours longer, but I tried to complete the side quests before moving on, though I wasn't super dedicated. And now that I've gotten all the preamble stuff out of the way, I am now going to start talking about the story, the gameplay, and my general thoughts on a lot of this game. I'll be covering quite a lot of territory as I go through it, so if you're worried about being corrupted by spoilers like a kid listening to Barrett swear, then be careful treading on. I will do my best to avoid spoilers, but you may be more sensitive than I am, so this is your warning. Potential spoilers are ahead. A couple things before I get into the story. 1, this story is considerably easier to follow than the original game. Perhaps they had more room to develop it, or maybe it was easier to listen to the voice acting, or maybe the translations were way better here. I'm not sure what the reason was, but it was noticeable. And 2, if you're familiar with the original game, this game takes place entirely inside of Midgar, right to the point where you get out. So that should place the setting firmly in your heads. You play through this game mostly as Cloud Strife, a dude with a huge sword and a questionable memory. You start off as the newest member of Avalanche, a counterculture group, though it's probably more accurately described as a violent rebel group that opposes Shinra, a huge corporation that has been draining the planet of Mako, a life force that flows through the planet when it is in a healthy state. But Shinra has tapped enough of the resource that some people can hear the planet calling out, trying to get the draining of Mako to stop. Avalanche has decided to destroy Shinra's capabilities by targeting Mako reactors. Without the ability to harvest Mako, Shinra would then be crippled and the planet would be able to recover. But Cloud has his own problems. Occasionally, like Harry when Voldemort is nearby, Cloud has visions of Sephiroth, who is generally considered to be a bad guy. He's not intricately tied to the plot in this game, but you can expect he'll probably show up in the later games. Lots of events happened that complicated Avalanche's mission, and eventually blowing up reactors kind of becomes a thing of the past. Now you're focused on much more pressing issues, and Shinra is becoming a much greater thorn in your side. Along the way, Cloud brings friends to adventure with him. Barrett, Tifa, Aerith, who used to be known as Eris in the original game, and kinda sorta Red 13 joins the party. So this game loses the turn-based combat that made the backbone of the original and all the Final Fantasies prior. Here we have an action RPG type of combat where you can move around the area and engage enemy you wish in standard attacks, and you can lock onto enemies to focus other attacks like spells and abilities. When you enter a combat menu, time slows way down, giving you time to make a proper selection without feeling like you're rushing through the menus just to click faster. If you want a comparison, it'll be similar to Dragon's Dogma, but with more menuing. There's a small part of it that kind of feels like a Souls-like, but while you can dodge, there are no invincibility frames here, so it should be merely used for positioning rather than trying to mitigate damage. At least there's no stamina meter, so you can roll around all you like, but eventually an enemy is going to wreck you if you don't play without some intention to your moves. You can also block, which should be your primary way of negating some damage if my experience has taught me correctly. And similar to the original game, there are no random encounters, so all battles are based on enemies that are in the world in front of you. They have set positions, and when you approach them, they engage into battle. So that's a super quick rundown of the story and gameplay. In between fights and walking around, you'll get quite a few cutscenes and some relatively boring side quests, but it never feels tedious. It always felt well balanced. I never got annoyed that I had to watch another cutscene, and the side quests were a nice change of pace since they were all grouped together when the story was transitioning from one major event to another. There's a lot in this game to discuss, and I'm sure I won't cover all the finer details, so I'll give you as many of my thoughts as I can cram into one video here, but if you'd like to discuss this game further with me, it's easiest to do on my Discord channel. Most significantly, I really like the visuals. Seriously, they're quite stunning. I found myself watching the cutscenes closely, paying attention to the facial expressions, the movements of the mouth, and even the way the characters walked and moved. The motion capture work was really spot on, but the animation as a whole was great. And another thing to consider is that the speech, the facial expressions, and all that were matched to the English voice actors.
So why not come home and get a job at the Sector 8 theater?
I'll think about it. You know, I'd really love to stay and chat, but we gotta go.
So soon?
Yeah, well, we hadn't even planned on dropping by. But Wedge wanted some of your famous pizza.
So good.
Typically, games are synced with the original Japanese, then English is dubbed to match as closely as possible, which will lead to some awkward sentences to fit the meaning to the lips. But this game did the work for English, and I fully assume they did all the work for Japanese as well. So at least twice, they did all the work to sync vocals. If anyone knows if they fully synced any other languages, I'd be fascinated to know. It's not easy work, but they did it because it was worth it in their eyes. I'll give them a ton of praise for that. While the animation was usually really good, there were some bits that got my attention. The most egregious would probably be Sam's beard, which just didn't look right at all. And a super minor one was Sephiroth's hair, which looked like it should have catch fire when he was standing in the flames. Picky? Sure, but I stand by it. There were some cool lighting effects in this game as well. It's easiest to see when you're going in and out of tunnels from the sunlight. Your screen will darken when you enter a tunnel, and will take a couple seconds to adjust. I know it was a big deal in the Fallout games, but it's still a cool effect. But the lighting in general was really nice too. From the neon lights in Sector 7 and Wall Market to inside buildings, it may not have been something everyone paid attention to, but I did, and I liked it. I also noticed that the camera was usually really good, which is something that you don't generally speak too positively about in a 3D adventure style game. But here, it was right where I needed it, especially in battles. I wasn't fighting it, it wasn't restricting what I saw or zoomed in too far or anything. It kind of feels goofy praising the people that worked on the camera, but I'm going to do just that. Except for being right up against the wall or in a tight space. Then the camera could end up fighting you a bit. It's unfortunate that they couldn't find a more elegant solution, like eliminating walls that you're looking through or something like that, but it happened quite rarely, so I won't hold it against them all that much. From visuals, I'm going to switch gears to audio. At first I was kind of thrown when Cloud started talking. In the original game, he wasn't quite a silent protagonist, but he didn't say much. In this game, he talks way more, and he seemed to have a bit of an attitude that I never got the sense he had originally. I thought he kind of sounded arrogant and annoying.
This is a one-time gig. When it's done, we're done. Really enjoy to work with though.
But it grew on me. I thought his voice acting was really good, and I started to understand his attitude as the game moved along. In fact, I think I liked all the voice acting. They were all distinct and felt genuine, and I don't recall any lines feeling like they were a miss. And if you're curious, Jessie was my girl. She was the best character.
Just for money?
One thing you might be missing is the victory fanfare after winning a fight. And while it is gone for almost every fight, you'll hear various versions occasionally. Barrett will sing it a few times, and the simulation dome thingy will play a version of it when you win a fight. There might be some more spots where it shows up, but that's all that I noticed, which is far too few. Heck, I have the Final Fantasy VI version as my ringtone on my phone currently, so I'm good with hearing it over and over again. But all the other music is beautiful. Most of them were performed by an orchestra and sound amazing, which I guess we've learned after years and years of orchestras touring around and playing video game music. The Tokyo Philharmonic Orchestra was used for a lot of the music in this game, and it paid off with full depth and complexity that the original could only hint at. It kinda sounded like I was praising a wine there. This was a huge step up, and yet another point in which they could have taken an easier way, but they brought in a full orchestra and determined that was the best way to get the sound they desired. Another thing that caught my attention was the casual dialogue of people as you walk by. As long as you only walk by once or twice, the conversations feel close to authentic-ish, which is way better than most other games. To know that these people are doing things that people do in real life adds a layer of depth to this world to make it feel real and actually lived in. It's not great, and it's far from perfect, but there are dozens, if not hundreds of people lining the streets, and most of them have something to say at least once.
Come on, gotta be something in here to eat. Or not. Nothing but trash.
But the thing about approaching reality is that we have greater and greater expectations. This game is by far the most intricate I've seen this care taken to create a world that feels lived in, but there's also so much more room for improvement. Lines get repeated, conversations don't progress, people don't move. We'll get there one day, but we're not quite there yet. As with most RPGs, I don't have a lot of great things to say about the side quests. I mean, I guess there aren't a ton of them, so there's that. Off the top of my head, there are 3 main areas where side quests are given. Sector 7, Wall Market, and before you scale the wall. You talk to an NPC with an icon over their head, and they send you on a typical mission, like kill a bunch of creatures, or you need to find this person, or things like that. Not a lot of creativity was put into most of the side quests, and those that were a bit more creative still felt a lot like busy work. Early on I did almost all of them, but like eating pancakes, by the end I was pretty sick of them. That was a bit of a reference to the comedian Mitch Hedberg, for those of you interested. That said, there is one thing that side quests did a great job with. When you complete a side quest's objective, you will get a screen that pops up asking you if you want to travel back to the quest giver. You can be really far away, but if you choose yes, you'll get whisked away to the loading screen and pop up right in front of the quest giver. It's super convenient, and I won't accept anything less from now on. The future is here, and I'm here to take full advantage of it. I had mentioned earlier that combat has evolved into an action RPG style of gameplay, and for the most part, this game transitions well, but there are some minor details worth considering. When you have a party, usually of 3, you generally play as just one character, but that means you take the bulk of the damage, do the bulk of the commands, and are the primary damage dealer. It feels like the other characters don't pull as much weight as they should. Of course, you have the option to cycle through your party members, and that becomes much more of a requirement the further along into the game you get, but you're still generally going to focus on one character, assuming that character is Cloud. He does nearly everything you need, and the other characters are merely there to fill up their ATB, active time battle gauge, limit breaks, or the occasional spell. And don't expect to see limit breaks very often. They exist and can be very powerful, and in the long drawn-out fights, you might see 2 or 3 casts of them, but there would be hours in between uses in regular, normal gameplay for me. It felt like the gauge didn't fill up much at all, so it wasn't practical to have any reliance on it at all. On the other hand, something that became way more useful compared to the original game was the assess command. I made a point of complaining about it in the review of the original game, so I will make a point in comparing that here. This time around, the assess command gives you much more information. You can find out the enemy's weaknesses, resistances, health, some backstory, and a brief explanation of the strategy to defeat them. It's a significant step up from the original. And beyond that, if you press the, I'm not sure what the button is called on the Steam Deck, but it has two squares on it. I think it might be called the menu button, but it's equivalent to the select button on other systems. Right, so if you press that button anytime during a fight, it brings up the information on that enemy. If you've assessed one before, that data will show up, and if you haven't assessed it, then it'll show question marks. And this time, it just takes one bar from your ATB gauge to activate rather than being a spell, so just a few attacks and you'll have enough action built up to cast it. Again, really well done, especially compared to the original. Back to things I didn't care much a whole lot about. I rarely upgraded my weapons. Now, I suspect that maybe it did more to help than I expected, but to be honest, I forgot about upgrades most of the time and never felt underpowered. Later on, I activated the auto upgrade option, and I forgot about it after that. I think the problem that I have with a system like this is that it pulls me in two directions. Do I upgrade my weapon, or do I just care about getting another weapon that's more powerful? Well, to answer that second part first, there aren't a whole lot of weapons in this game, and they rarely seem to be more powerful than what you're carrying, so I guess I should have just upgraded. But how do I know if I'm about to run into the next best thing hiding in a chest somewhere? And yes, you can remove upgrades to apply them to another weapon, but again, I never felt underpowered, so I never felt the need to go chasing after those upgrades. It was a system that had some cool potential, but without that feedback to the player that this is worthwhile, it never became anything more than another menu option in my pause screen. Outside of combat, there are some cool things implemented in this game. I really like the auto action feature. I don't actually remember what they called it, but essentially it's a blue arrow on the ground that tells you that the next movement action will be done automatically, so you don't need to do anything to activate it other than walk toward it. For example, all ladders act this way. You don't have to press a button to get on a ladder. You don't have to line yourself up just right. All you have to do is hit the blue marker on the ground. From there, the game takes control of your character in a mini cutscene, moves Cloud onto the ladder, and from there you take control again and move up or down as you wish. The same for walking across a narrow ledge. You hit the marker, the game takes control briefly to position you correctly, then you just press the direction you want to go. It's super easy, but it takes a minor stress and completely removes it. No buttons, just walk. Another thing that I straight up loved, and every freaking game should have implemented this already, but you don't have to pick up a single thing in this game. I'm looking at you, Minecraft. You don't have to run around collecting experience. You've already done the work. You don't have to press a button to bend over and pick up items. You don't have to do any of that. If you slice open a box and there's an item inside, it shows on the ground briefly, but it's already in your inventory. If you defeat an enemy, you don't have to run around as things explode from its guts. It's already on you. Don't make me work for something I've already worked for. And this game, again, took a minor issue and removed it. Just beautiful. Among other things that generally worked well for me, the compass felt like it was easy to follow. It never seemed to lead me to a dead end or at some other kind of barrier, so even when my trip was long, if I followed the compass, it got me to where I needed to go. Unlike the map. On the surface, the map was fine. It showed me where I was at, and it showed me what the area around me looks like. It does what a map does. But when you tried to get more information, like choosing a side quest to follow, it felt super confusing. One of the main issues was that it had quite a few maps, each of a different region. That's fine. Heck, that's great. I can flip through a map of Section 7, or Wall Market, or the church, and not have one huge map to go through. The problem is that the side quest markers show up on every one of those maps. So out in the middle of nowhere, an icon shows up for all the quests that are in your list. It's a bit confusing, and at times downright frustrating. It's one of the reasons I gave up on side quests later in the game. I had a ton of icons from open quests that I had, and I was struggling to figure out where I needed to go. If you played the original game, you'll know that saving the game could be a bit of an effort. You had to find an icon to save at, or if you had progressed far enough, you could save in the overworld. This game removes that stress as well. You can save anywhere, just as long as you're not considered in combat. Now, that last bit about being out of combat is a bit of a pain as well, because I had to give up on some progress because I ran out of recording space in one instance. I gotta capture all that game footage for you guys, and maybe for you, your battery is about to die and you're not next to your charger. But when you're engaged in a fight for more than half an hour, you may have to cut your losses, and I guess wins, and hope that you've saved prior to the fight. Otherwise, you could set yourself back quite a bit. But overall, being able to save anywhere is way better than before. I found the best place to save was at a bench. In the original game, beds and inns were the best place to take a break, but in this world, there are vending machines and benches. If you sit on a bench, you regain all your health and magic points, so it makes it easy to mark it as a return spot with a save. To be honest, trying to find a bed wasn't worth it. There aren't that many, and ultimately, you're going to be on the move a lot, and benches are placed in the most convenient spots. Now, the vending machines, on the other hand, didn't feel super helpful. They sell consumables, which is fine, but they also sell weapons, accessories, and materia. But they all sell the same stuff. Once you have what's available to them, all the weapons, accessories, and materia become useless to look through. Even the consumable items remain the same, but at least they're consumable, so you might have a reason to pick some more up. At least you have the option to sell items at a vending machine, because Lord knows you're going to have a ton of them. But like I felt with upgrading, I didn't really feel a need to sell items all that often, particularly late game. You're going to end up with a ton of money. You can't buy any weapons that'll help you out. The accessories aren't really worth fiddling around with, and you hardly use items since your spells will do the trick most of the time. So all the items that you'll pick up over time are just sitting in your inventory. You could sell them, but that's unnecessary. You can carry up to 99 of each. You don't need the money, but you're not using the items you pick up. You can sell them each time, but it takes time that doesn't gain you anything significant. Either make the items much more helpful or get rid of them. And here's a minor gripe. When you go to a weapons trader, you can scroll through the weapons that are for sale, and they will show that each character will gain or lose skill points with attack damage or magic damage or whatever, but it doesn't show you by how much. So if you want to see if the gain from the physical damage is worth the loss in magical damage, you'll have to leave the menu and go into your equipped items to see what the starting numbers are, then return to the vendor. Fortunately, most weapons weren't worth buying, so it didn't matter a whole lot, but that seems almost like an oversight. Unless, perhaps, I'm the idiot, and there was a way to show that and I couldn't tell. But I'm going to be honest, I don't really care. Like I just said, I didn't end up buying many weapons, so I was fine. And of course, I have to talk about the materia system. It didn't feel much different from the original, but there were some changes for the better. Most significantly, you can grab materia from characters that are no longer in your party, meaning that you didn't lose the ability to have someone heal you just because you didn't know that that party member was about to leave you. And there are several new ones you can try out, as well as have Chadley develop new ones for you, if you're willing to help him out. I didn't go out of my way to help him out, but it was kind of cool to see him create new options for me. I would say that the game feels like they did a great job converting the PlayStation 1 world to a modernized game. Everything looks great, and for the most part, if you know the first map, then you have a decent idea where things are on this map. Sure, it's not a straight-up one-to-one conversion, but it's not far off. Not only did the development team place buildings and other things in generally the correct spot, but they were able to make it feel authentic too. The buildings fit in with each other, and the overall environmental design was great. But the game didn't run very well for me. Remember, I played on a Steam Deck, so it will likely vary for people running on a computer or PlayStation, but my experience was, at times, very frustrating. There were quite a few moments where the game really struggled to keep up. Interestingly enough, it was never when I was in a fight. The console struggled the most when it was running a cutscene. I'm not sure what it was about the cutscenes that brought things to a halt, but my frame rate often dropped to less than a frame per second, and on several occasions even crashed the system. Whenever the game crashed, I had to hard reboot the console, and whatever I had recorded was lost because the file couldn't close. This meant that I lost several hours of video due to crashes. So when I said at the top that I didn't feel this game deserved to be considered playable on the Steam Deck, this is the reason why. Everything else felt like a solid yes, but the frame rate lag, stuttering, and crashing meant that it was significant enough for me to submit a no when my Steam Deck asked me if playable matched my experience. A few more thoughts before we head our separate ways today. I thought the puzzles in this game were creative. I had fun with most of them. There are 18 chapters, so you're looking at an hour and a half to 2 hours for most of them. If you care about the story, you'll know that Red 13, while relatively old in human time, is still considered to be a kid. And I think his voice acting should have reflected that. His voice should have been much younger. Without spoiling anything, I will say that I was a little surprised by the ending. I know it was hard to decide how to create an ending where the original game kept going, but I think what they did in this game didn't quite belong. Honestly, it's a minor thing. And after you complete the game, you're presented with a few options, including a hard mode which removes your ability to use items and heal magic points when you rest, but it also unlocks intermission, an additional story that I had mentioned earlier. And I think that's about it. Sure, there are many more things I could have covered about this game, but this video is already getting pretty long. Plus, we could save those details for conversation in the comment section or on Discord. So after all that, would I recommend this game? I think that's an easy yes. If you like the Final Fantasy games, or role-playing games in general, this one does a great job of bringing those into a new era. And the little details make this game all the more exciting to play. Sure, on its own, being able to climb a ladder with no hassle isn't much, but given it's tied in with everything else that is done right in this game, it just adds to a great gaming experience. I would just say that if you play this, if you can avoid the Steam Deck, unfortunately, that would be my recommendation. On a similar note, we don't know how this will play on the Switch 2 at the time of this recording, so maybe wait for reviews to see if it is able to handle the game better than what I experienced. And is this game replayable? Well, yes-ish. Hard mode will make things more challenging the second time around, and having intermission as well is nice, but really, it's a role-playing game. You're not going to gain anything unless you tackle a completionist run or something like that. It's fun to play once, so it'll be fun to play again, but without the other two games in the series, it's mildly replayable. And what score should we give this game? I'll give it a 9 out of 10. A solid 90%. It's a lot of fun, a great upgrade to the original, and cleans up a whole lot of issues. My issues, for the most part, are relatively minor, and only knock it down a little bit. I've tried to ignore the frame rate issue and crashing when scoring this game, assuming that it is an isolated Steam Deck issue. Before I go, here's a brief glimpse of the final boss fight. So folks, I've covered a lot today. In fact, this may be my longest video, so yeah, I've covered quite a bit, but I still didn't cover everything. Was I fair? Was I wrong? Let me know in the comments section. There's a lot to discuss with this game, and I would love to hear what your thoughts are. Here's where YouTubers thank their Patreon supporters, but I don't have a Patreon page. I do have a Discord channel, which I have mentioned before. Come find me there if you want to talk to me about Final Fantasy VII, or any other game, or anything else really. And thank you to everyone who watched this video. Without you, I'm just a weirdo talking into a microphone. And if you want to support my efforts at all, a like on the video would be amazing. And if you love this video, I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers, so you could be one of them. But when it all comes down to it, if you do one thing today, I hope that you have a wonderful day. Peace.